Over the years, Norfolk Catholic has had more success than almost any program on the football field. The Knights have made Class C1 history on Tuesday with their championship win over Albion, Boone Central, Newman Grove. The 24-13 victory for the Knights made them the first ever Class C1 team to win 3 consecutive state titles. They were also the first team ever to appear in 4 consecutive state finals. And the Knights did it with a little bit of conflict in styles. The first half was a defensive struggle, ended 3-3 after a somewhat controversial field goal by Boone Central's Fabian Honard on the last play of the first half after an additional second was put back on the clock. But Norfolk Catholic got things going offensively in the second half. Jackson Love finished with 144 yards on the ground on 24 carries. Jordan Bellar was 10 of 17 through the air for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns, including a kind of a dagger touchdown pass to Allen Lewis early in the fourth quarter, That came right after Albion Boone Central had attempted a fake punt that was just barely overthrown by Hunter Henry. It was one of those plays that it was such a turning point in the game because Boone Central gets that fake punt to work. You're talking about a whole different ballgame. They could have punched it in for a score, taken the lead. Instead, Catholic turned around and turned it into a 2-score deficit. Arnie Johnson, Boone Central's coach, was talking about the momentum of the game afterwards, and that's one of the things he pointed to. And Boone Central, it's a great season for the Cardinals. It's been quite a while, actually, since 2004 that they were in the Class C1 finals, and they got there this year, losing only to Norfolk Catholic during the regular season. Now on Tuesday, Tanner Mazur, who's more of a running quarterback actually, does great things with his legs, shows that he has a pretty good arm too. He was 18 of 32 through the air, 257 yards, his favorite targets being Derek Gintrup, who had 8 catches for 118 yards, and Hunter Henry, who got 4 balls for 101 yards. One problem though for Mazur came in the second half. He ended up with 3 interceptions. 2 of those were picked off by Jordan Bellar in the fourth quarter. The second one absolutely clinching the win for Norfolk Catholic and just creating one of those emotional scenes that you don't necessarily expect out of a veteran coach like Jeff Bellar. But there was so much on the line for Catholic, and they've been through so much this year that it wasn't a surprise at all to see, and it was a very touching moment. I think anybody who saw it, anybody who was close to it, I think everyone was on the verge of tears at that point.
I don't want to tell you guys that we're playing this game crazy. I don't know if that'd be right because we don't get that cooking crazy, all right? I'm very proud of you guys. You muscled up, you mentally got through it. It was great for our school, great for you guys, and great for all of you. I'm really proud of you. That's what we're doing.
Also repeating as a state champion this week, Elgin Pope John in Class D1 with a 40-14 win over Exeter Milligan. The Wolfpack have now won 26 straight games, leading to those 2 straight championships. It was a different situation for Elgin Pope John though, because they trailed at halftime for the first time all year. They were down 14-8, but it didn't take them long to get things going. A 4-play drive on their first drive of the second half resulted in a Blake Anderson touchdown. Then they ended up recovering a muffed punt in the end zone. Elgin Pope John scores 32 unanswered points in the second half to basically roll to a 40-14 win in a game that looked like it was going to be a little bit closer at halftime, but you had to kind of expect that out of Elgin Pope John. They're just a machine, and with Ross Schindler and Blake Anderson having that kind of dual threat in the backfield, Schindler being the quarterback, Anderson being the fullback, it's tough to prepare for them. It's tough to stop them, even though you know it's going to come. Schindler actually finished with 141 yards and a pair of touchdowns on 16 carries. He had a heck of a season. Blake Anderson, 22 carries, 110 yards also. 2 straight state titles, a great way for those two, as well as the rest of the Elgin Pope John senior class, to cap their career. Now, the 9 seniors on the Humphrey St. Francis roster didn't have that storybook finish that Elgin Pope John did, but they had a great season, and they got to be proud of the fact that they finished as the state runner-up in Class D2. They finished with a 12-1 record, and they finished with what is still probably the best defense in the state. They just faced a very good offense. Jake Finley, Giltner's quarterback, is such a quality quarterback, especially at the 8-man level. 35 of 52, 396 yards, 5 touchdowns for Finley in Giltner's 42-26 win over St. Francis. And he finishes the year with 67 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Now, I know the kid's not in our coverage area, but I'm highlighting this just to express, St. Francis gave up 42 points to Giltner, but their defense is still really solid. They came in giving up less than 10 points a game. They came in giving up less than 150 rushing yards a game, and a lot of those numbers were put up on their second stringers in the second half. Giltner just had an incredible offensive football team this year. It wasn't just Finley. He had a group of receivers that were incredibly hard to stop. St. Francis, to its credit, after struggling in the first half, They had a turnover that was very costly. They had a penalty that was very costly. But that 12-1 season, like I said, was a pretty incredible feat for this group. They started out as freshmen. They were state champions in 2009. They had a couple years where they had to battle back to get to this point, and they leave the program in good shape, especially considering that St. Francis has one of the most talented running backs in the state, who was just a sophomore this year, J.J. Oltmer, returning next year. Oltmer rushed for well over 1,000 yards, and he will be one of the staples in a program, but it is Humphrey St. Francis. It's so tradition-rich. They do such a great job of rebuilding year after year. There's so much stability there with Eric Kessler, not only the football coach, but the basketball coach for St. Francis. Now, speaking of basketball, the season is on the way. This was our last fall edition of The Buzz. We're going to take a couple weeks off, but we will be back, I believe, in the second week of December to start discussing the winter sports. I hope you join me then. I also hope that you pick up our winter preview edition, which will appear in next Thursday's newspaper, which is also the first night of the regular season for the winter sports. If you don't do that, make sure you pick up every other paper, though, because paper should be recycled. For The Buzz, I'm Tom Beamer.